Hi, friends. You've arrived at the space in between. I'm your host, Dinine Sig. I'm an attorney, a mom, an author, an entrepreneur, and a widow. You are in the right place if you want to learn how we will navigate life's transitional moments, both good and not so good. Together, we will find the magic and bring the light to anything you are dealing with. Come sit with us in the space in between. Today, we're here with Jason Barnaby in the studio, and I am so excited to get this interview recorded.
Me too.
Yeah. We tried once before and it was a little interesting. But Jason is a coach. He's a fractional sales guy. He's a keynote speaker. He's an author. I have his book, Igniting the Firestarter Within, right in front of me. I have dog-eared 1 million pages in this book.
Love it.
And I love that too. Thank you for writing it for the rest of us. And so Jason and I met through a friend of ours, and I'll just recap quickly.
Sure.
We were supposed to have a 5-minute, 15-minute coffee
That's right.
sort of setup thing, and we ended up on the phone for over an hour.
Yep.
And we talked about some really interesting stuff. But I do remember, whether it was that call or our first meeting, where you said, and it might even be in the book, even though I've dog-eared so many pages, you said in 2020 or 2021 that you fell into a hole, crawled into a hole, and started decorating because you couldn't see your way out.
I think that was probably 2020 because COVID was for many, right? It was the catalyst of, the hole was probably already there because I'd probably crawled into it a couple of times earlier in my lifetime.
It's already partially decorated.
But I definitely dug it deeper, and I talk a lot about comfort zones, and so I figured, well, I'm going to be in this hole for a while. I might as well decorate it and make it somewhere I want to stay. Misery loves company. Misery also apparently likes really nice decorations so that you can hang out and be comfortable. Misery does love company. I can personally attest to that. So I know that I got this wrong once before, so I want to get it right. Sure. That wasn't when you wrote the book. No. Okay, so let's talk about the book too, but I just wanted to hit on that quote because it's epic, and it should be on T-shirts. I appreciate that. Well, and here's a full circle moment. The person that introduced us, Christy Gaynor, shout out, was also the person who was the catalyst for me to write that book, because I went to a leadership conference, and one of the breakout sessions was how to write a book in 6 weeks. And I was like, there's no way that can't be true. And this lady had us do a couple of different activities, and the one that I chose to do was to write an introduction. And she said, write it as if you're writing to your ideal reader. And I started writing, and she said time, and I was like, what? I thought we just started. It'd been 15 minutes. It just came out. And I want to say that was probably 2015, probably 2015, I think. So I decided then, and I told Christy that I was going to write this book, and Christy, like Christy does, goes, okay, well, in 3 weeks, we're going to have lunch, and I want you to do bump, 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 bump. And she literally put it on her calendar, and we had lunch, and she's like, are you done? And I'd actually done way more than that.
Unbelievable, that woman. She
has been a cheerleader her whole life, literally on cheerleading teams, and just is the greatest cheerleader person in the world.
She's the greatest person to have in your corner, and a great connector.
She really
Christy
is.
Gaynor, we are shouting you out over and over again.
Hope you listen to this.
Yes.
And so here's what's funny. So I decided that I was going to write this book, and so I started telling people, what are you up to? When you haven't seen people for a while. And I'm like, well, I'm writing a book, because it sounds cool. And I said that for, I don't know, a couple of years anyway. And then finally I said it to somebody that I didn't know that I had said it to before, and they're like, weren't you doing that last time we talked? When are you gonna publish that book? And I was like, well, damn. So then I kept working on it. And then actually this month is my anniversary month of the month that I received severance from my job.
Amazing.
So I worked on finishing that right after my position was eliminated. So I'm going to say that we got it out into the world in probably 2019 because it was before COVID. And what I love about what you said and still blows me away is when you said thank you for writing it for the rest of us. I didn't write it for you. And I don't mean that like in a rude way, but like I wrote it for me and I didn't think anybody was going to read it. Honestly, I was like, I've always wanted to write a book. A lot of my stuff is in there and it was very cathartic to write it. And I'm blown away when people like somebody said once like, oh, I bought your book because I saw that it has really good Amazon reviews. And I'm like, I have reviews on Amazon? Like what? So, yeah, I appreciate you saying that because
I didn't know that. I need to go review the book on Amazon.
Yes, you do.
It's
Please.
Amazing. It's amazing. I love the book. So this book, Igniting the Firestarter Within by Jason Barnaby, has been a little bit of a guidebook for me this year. I've put it down. I've picked it back up. I've put it down. And as you know, I have the workbook too.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so one of the things I wanted to sort of talk about in the sort of the beginning part of the book is you describe obviously igniting a fire, and then you talk about the difference between smoke and a flame. And so I really see that visual, that's a smoke that's just sort of petering out, but it's still there, and a flame. And I just wonder if you could speak a little bit on that.
Yeah, I find that the longer time passes between putting the book out and now, I find many, many more scenarios where that smoke and fire thing really come into play. When I originally wanted to put that in the book, I had that phrase. I don't know if you've heard this phrase. Lots of people say it, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yes, definitely.
So I took that, I had that as an idea, and I went and interviewed one of my friends who is a firefighter. And he was like, well, not necessarily. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. And that's where I learned about the fire triangle. I'm writing a book about fire starters. You probably know about the fire triangle. And so he said, you have to have a heat source, you have to have fuel, and you have to have oxygen. And if you don't have those three things, that's where you will see like smoke but no flame, because one of those three components is not there.
And that's in the book as well.
So for me, I have seen and I have used, and that's the other thing. When you read the book, I will say that pretty much all the examples that I use, even if I'm not talking about me, I'm talking to me. That book was written by me to me, really.
And we're all the better for it, I think, because it's a really great book.
Thank you. So that smoke thing, I know we're going to talk about this at a later time, but I think I probably walked around in the smoke for the last couple of years. But I also see people use the smoke as an excuse, right? These are the people who are, like my book thing. How's that book thing going? Well, and when people are in that smoke, you hear a lot of like, well, I'm getting ready to, I just have to do a couple of things first and then I'm gonna.
Yes. I totally, it's an interesting thing that you bring up because I never saw the connection, but my mom has been trying to move on in her life in a certain way. And you are literally explaining exactly what has been going on for the past 6 months, where the family sort of gave her 10 months to do some things and move on to help her health, to help all of us see her more. And it's, well, I just need to make sure that the pavers are this way. And I just need to make sure that 30-foot ceiling is painted. And it's like the excuses, they're just excuses at this point.
Yeah.
That's smoke. And I never saw that in my personal life with the book until, I've seen it in but now I'm just having this conversation yesterday with a family member, and we didn't call it smoke, but I just have to look for a new hose at, Home Depot. Like it's similar, right?
And I find that most of the people that I coach that are in the smoke, when I paint the ceiling or when I get the pavers to look right, that's not the end.
No.
That's what they've been telling themselves. And then when they get to the bottom, they go, oh, well, there's a couple more things I need to do. And
I didn't just need a hose. I need a new spigot redone. I need this.
And that I think really goes to a quote that I used to quote it in every keynote that I did. I still quote it quite a bit. It's a Jack Canfield quote that everything you want is on the other side of fear.
Absolutely. I agree with it. I just don't know that I can always get on that side.
Well, and it's hard because on the other side of fear, there's unknown. There's things that in the absence of known, our brains will make up the worst case scenarios for the unknown, which will keep us stuck and afraid. And what I've realized as I have walked out of the smoke, there's just, I mean, if you can picture being at a campfire, right? And the wind shifts and suddenly you're in the smoke and your eyes start burning and your throat, is
I've been there.
burning. Right.
Yeah.
You want to get out of that as soon as you possibly can. And I've been in campsites before, like you move and then like the wind follows you and you're in the smoke again, and you move and you're in the smoke again. But it's when you get to that place where you're truly out and it's like your eyes stop burning, your throat stops burning, you have clarity, you're like, you take a deep breath. It's a reset.
That's what I was just thinking.
Yeah.
Everything's so much clearer.
Yes.
You're out of the smoke.
Yeah.
And those are amazing analogies, amazing pictures that you're drawing there. So you said yourself that you had been walking around in the smoke a little bit with the book, and then you finally found your way to a clearing, to getting it done. Something must have spurred you on, which we're all very grateful for and thankful for that. I want to, in the book, move a little bit further ahead.
Sure.
And I want to spend some time on page 65 of the book. Let's talk a little bit about everyone needs a tribe.
Yes.
And then there are some people listening right now that do not have one.
Yep.
And we are not calling them out to not have one, but maybe Jason has some that he can give you some tips on maybe how to find a tribe. And I could also give you some tips that I've used this past year. But let's just say you're still looking for your tribe. What are some tips, Jason, that you have before we get into the members of your tribe? What are some tips you have for someone who's looking to find their tribe? Whether they're a college kid, whether they're a 75-year-old retiree at home, whether they're someone in our age group still working, having kids that are aging up into and out of high school and into college. I have some tips. What are some of yours?
Well, I would say first, if you're looking around, which we do, especially now with social media, if you're looking around and comparing yourself to other people and saying, well, they've got a great tribe and they have it all, they don't. I've done enough coaching to know that nobody has it all together. And so if you're sitting there feeling sorry for yourself and looking at everybody else and thinking that they've got it all figured out and they have a better tribe than you do, they just don't. So that's the first thing. Stop comparing yourself if you are. Secondly, what is the one thing that you need in a person right now? Because the other thing is people will go, well, I don't have a tribe, so I need this, and I need that, and I need this, and I need that. And then it becomes the list that you start working through that you never finish. And so you don't activate it. So do you need somebody who's a listener? Do you need somebody who's a catalyst? Do you need somebody who's an expert? Like, what is it that you're looking for? If you're sitting there going, I don't have a tribe, what would that provide for you?
That's like a good first step. So maybe you look at what your lifestyle is. I was just thinking while you were talking, who is the person that if you're into jazz music, who's the person that's going to go to a jazz ensemble concert with you? Maybe you don't know them well, but you both like jazz.
Right.
That's a good thing to do. Besides, the best advice you gave is, number one, stop comparing yourself, because comparison is the thief of joy. I am so guilty of that.
We all are, especially with social media.
Yeah, it's just, and even if you go weeks without comparing, it just takes a minute, right, to slip right back into it. So we're all fighting that. And, for those of you listening, no one's saying that you have to achieve this perfection and not looking. It's just really try hard to hear what Jason is saying. Nobody's life is all that good or all that perfect. So let's say you like jazz, or let's say you love to knit, or let's say you stay home a lot, but you love animals. You love your cats. You love your dog. If you're on a college campus and you really love, Korean food, there's all different ways to sort of find at least, I think, a couple of members of your tribe.
Sure.
But they are not going to knock on your door, right?
That is 100% true, because here's the thing. Everybody else is waiting on everybody else to knock on their door.
Perfect.
And it's not. So the next thing I would say is ask. And people they're like, well, I could never ask. What if people say no? And my response to that, next to yes, that's the best answer that you can get. Because if you ask them, you're asking them because you want them to show up.
Yeah.
If they say no, great, because that means that they weren't going to be somebody that you could count on anyway. And then the other thing is there's so many places that you can go and volunteer that are looking and needing people to go sit with elderly folks in
like
a nursing home
or a retire,
right? Yeah. To show up for game day and be a game person, or just to listen. There are so many possibilities with online communities. So it doesn't even have to be IRL, right? It doesn't even have to be in real life. You can just do it. You can find those other communities that have very active chat boards and threaded conversations online. But again, it has to be active. It's not going to come it's not going to fall in your lap. You're not going to get 10 Facebook requests for you to join people's communities. Yeah. You need to go put those requests out into the world.
That's one of the things that I really want to stress is that whether it's online, like Jason said, or in person, you really do have to reach out. That's the first step. And I hope that if you're listening, you are able to reach out. While you were talking, I was thinking of the cashier at my grocery store, my favorite grocery store. She is always asking me how I'm doing when she looks at what I'm purchasing. She knows that my dog eats salmon. So she's like, oh, is that salmon for Louie? And then out of the blue, I found out she was a widow too. And it was just amazing because I never considered that we would have that in common. So you just never know where it is, and you just got to keep pushing a little bit, I think. And I don't mean pushing to get into a group that doesn't want you, pushing to find a place or even one person that you have that commonality.
Well, and I think what you just said is another just really, really important piece. And that is, and I'm still learning the benefits of this. I've been actively practicing it for about the last year, but curiosity is an incredibly powerful thing. And like you just said, spending 30 seconds talking to the cashier instead of just staring out the window while they're, rolling your groceries or
your phone
or whatever, right? Asking, how are you?
Yeah.
What,
I've been trying really hard lately. My dad was always the guy who complimented everybody.
Yeah. I do the same thing. It drives my kids crazy.
But now I'm trying to be like my dad.
Right.
And I'll see somebody, and even if I don't love everything that she's doing, I'll be like, I love your nail color. That's a beautiful shirt. And I find that I feel better because I'm not staring at my phone.
Yes.
I've been trying to be really intentional about that. And I think, like you said, it makes you feel better. It makes me feel better. Now, when I see that same cashier, she's always like, you're here. She's so happy to see me in the store. And we talk the whole time. And then, I leave. So, and she's always like, I'm so lucky that I get to see you. And it's a very beautiful exchange. But yes, I love where we're going with that. So then in line with that, let's just say you're somebody listening that already does have a tribe, or you have some people that are sort of around you. There's a saying, it's not in Jason's book, but there's a saying that you are most like the 5 people you hang out or interact with the most.
Jim Rohn quote.
Jim Rohn? Okay.
Yep.
I have heard the quote since I was little. I think my mom used to say it, or maybe she just said, you are who you hang out with, or whatever. Right. Jason actually has a little bit of, in the book itself, a little bit of like a couple of lines where you can do a little workshopping on your own life. But you list out, I think it is 7 or 8. 7 different members of your tribe. And I want to kind of go through a little bit. We don't have to go deep, but I want to go through, I'm going to list them, and then I want you to pick up on whichever one.
Sure.
So there's a listener, there's a dreamer, there's a devil's advocate, there's an organizer, a catalyst, a connector, and an expert. And I already know I'm always seeking the experts. I know that already. But Jason, which one we talked about Christy Gaynor, that she's a catalyst, right?
And I would say a connector, because, and that's important, that you can have people that play multiple roles. And if somebody is going through this, and we can put a link, I can give you a link that people can get the tribal inventory.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
If you have somebody playing more than 2 roles, that's where I would tell you need a little bit more diversity in your tribe. And that's where you need to go look through it. I tend to talk a lot about the devil's advocate and the dreamer, because I am a dreamer.
Okay.
And dreamers tend to, I know a lot of dreamers who are married to devil's advocates.
I'm laughing because
opposites attract is the only way that I can explain that.
I think I dated a devil's advocate, but yeah. Go.
So, and what's interesting is dreamers are definitely not devil's advocates, and they know it. I would say devil's advocates sometimes think they're dreamers and believe that they are. They are the worst people to have in a room when you are doing a whiteboarding session, because devil's advocates, they'll look at your list and go, yes, but. I don't know if you've ever done any of that improv stuff, the yes and.
Yes.
But is a conversation killer. And devil's advocates can't help themselves, because they look at it and they go, that's preposterous. That's never going to work. That's got 17 holes in it. And I need to show you which ones they are because you're not seeing them. And while I would agree that there is truth to that, later.
Yeah.
So you do a dreaming session with dreamers, because dreamers are like, or we could do that, or we could do this, and we could do that, and we could do this. My favorite thing to do is be in a room with like 3 or 4 whiteboards and a bunch of markers and just go crazy. And people go, well, we don't like that. So you erase it all and start all over. And then, great. You don't want devil's advocates in the room at that time. You want them at the end of the process, when you've gone through the dreaming, when you've done all the iteration, when you've done all the planning and trying to decide which of the 3 options is the best. That's when you want the devil's advocates. And unfortunately, because devil's advocates often think that they are dreamers, if you have many devil's advocates in your tribe and few dreamers, it can really affect how you get creative, how you dream. In fact, one of the clients that I did this first with, when she came back, I said, how was the exercise? And she goes, it was terrible. And it was like the second client I did it with. And I was like, well, that's not what I went into here. And I said, why? And she said, because I'm on a team. I'm a dreamer, and I'm on a team with 5 devil's advocates. And she said, so every time I have this great idea, I feel like they're just standing in line waiting to smack it down. And she said, so what has happened over time is I stopped sharing my dreams. I stopped sharing my great ideas because they're just going to shoot them down. And I was like, well, sister, we need to go find you some dreamers. So we did. And it made all the difference in the world.
When I used to do some work with large companies, I would try to bring this idea into the room. And I wonder if this could work for devil's advocates. There is no bad idea for 15 minutes. So no one is allowed to poo-poo or strike down. Like for 15 minutes, you can only explore the idea and, like you said, yes and. I wonder, do devil's advocates feel like they're going to bust during that time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've started to pay a lot more, especially as I'm speaking again, I'm starting to pay a lot more attention to the energy that's in a room. And though they may not be saying anything, their body language and their facial expressions are screaming, and they're just sucking the energy out of the room. Yeah. So if you know that they are, and they're willing to admit that they are devil's advocates, I would just tell them, like, hey, this is probably going to be a pretty frustrating thing for you. Why don't you go grab coffee for 15 minutes, come back in 15 minutes when we're done with that piece. Because that just removes that negativity from the room, even if they weren't going to say anything, because they're sitting there like yelling with their faces. Right. That this is dumb, or that's never going to work, or that's silly, or
rolling their eyes. Yeah. Okay. So we've sort of covered dreamers and devil's advocates. We talked about our mutual friend who we both love, who's both a connector and a catalyst. Yep. There's the listener. Mm-hmm. And listeners, you're listening right now, but this is a little bit different, I believe.
It is. I would say that it's a very active role. It's not a vocal role. So the description in the book is listeners are these people that you just pour everything out to. And they're engaged, they're shaking their head, they're asking questions, they're getting curious. And they're the people that if you went on like a 10-minute diatribe and you got to the end, you're like, you know what I mean? They'd be like, yep. And if they didn't, they would say, I think so, but let me ask this question. And they just lean in. And I will tell you that for a lot of my life, I was not a very good listener. I was the kind of listener that listened until you were done talking so that I could start talking. That was the kind I was. And, my parents said this to me, maybe yours did to you. It's been said to lots of kids, like, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Yeah. Yeah. And the older I get, the more I realize that that's true. And the more that I lean into that curiosity, which is really what drives listeners, I would say curiosity and empathy, that it's so powerful. And so often listeners are so great at just absorbing it. And at the end of that, you go, oh, I feel so much better. And they didn't do anything. They just I mean, they did something, but you know what I mean? They didn't.
They actively listened.
That's, as I have tried to practice intensively active listening, it's not easy. No. It's a big activity. It's a big deal.
Yeah. And it's so appreciated in probably every friendship, across the world, to have that friend that will just listen, or that person. Then you talk about an organizer, and the last one is an expert. So an organizer, is that someone, my sister helps me literally organize. She's in my house. Yep. And she has an extra day. She'll stay. And
she probably loves it too, right?
I don't know if she loves it, but she's so much better at it than me. Mm-hmm. So she'll just do it.
Right.
One of my cousins was in my house over spring break, and she, I think, loved it. She went through, I had a walk-in pantry in my house in Florida. She went in it and just started organizing it. And the next thing I know, she was like cleaning pots we hadn't used because they had not been used in a year. And she was like, I'm going to put these lids back here, and I'm going to do whatever she was doing. Right. I was like, okay, like if that's how you want to spend part of your night tonight. But so are those the organizers? Is that like literal?
It can be. It can be somebody who's coming in and physically doing the things. I find for me in my life, so I have ADHD, and the statistics say that the average person has anywhere from 8,000 to 16,000 thoughts a day. I think I probably have somewhere around 25,000. I don't have a shortage of ideas. I have a shortage of time to execute those ideas, and I have a shortage of memory to remember all of the ideas that I had. And so for me, an organizer is somebody who can listen to your plan or listen to your goals, listen to what you want to do, and say, this needs to go first, then this needs to go second. Because I'm kind of I have been in my life, a ready, fire, aim person. And they are like, no, plan it out, scope it out, aim for what you want, go for the target, get to where you want to be. But this has to come before this, which has to come before this. Because if you try to step down here, because I'm also impatient, which that combination is frustrating. So I often want to jump to like step 5, and they're like, you could, but it's going to be a disaster because you haven't done 1 to 4. And what I love about organizers is that to them, it's so clear. And I'm always amazed when somebody helps me with those things and listen. I'm like, how do you do that? And it's that's why we need them. It is their skill set.
Yeah.
I have the creative side. They look at me and like, how did you fill up 3 whiteboards in 20 minutes? I'm like, that's just what I do.
I think you and I have that in common.
Yeah, I think we do.
And then we're going to talk about why in a minute, I think.
Yes.
I think we've touched on everybody. The expert, what can you say about that in a short sort of thing? Or do you want to talk we need them because, and for me, and I'm looking for them both in like fitness, in intelligence, in business. I'm trying to always look for somebody who is 2 to 3 to 4 years ahead of where I want to be. Yeah.
Because the things that I'm looking at, they're like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to get through this? They've blown through that, and they can give you a great perspective. They can encourage you. They can help you figure out what needs to go next. And the other thing, and it comes up more, I think, with experts than others, but you need to also know that as your life progresses and as you develop, your tribe is going to look very different. When I first started in my business 6 years ago, I had a very tight-knit tribe of people, and most of them I don't talk to anymore. We're still friends.
Right.
But
they're not in your daily or weekly life.
They've developed and moved on or gone in different directions. I've developed and moved on and gone in different directions. And so I'm constantly looking at this inventory. I do it every year and say, who, like what I said at the beginning, what do I need right now? What's the one role that I could really use? And who are those people, and are they the right people?
That's probably a good place to sort of wrap this up, right? When you're thinking about your tribe, we've gone through the 7 sort of archetypes of who can be in your tribe. And then you maybe want to start with, what do I need right now? Do I need a listener? Do I need an organizer? Do I need an expert? Do I need a connector? Mm-hmm. A lot of us, I think, when we're first getting started, a connector is probably the best person you need, but you may not know that they're a connector until you form a little bit of a relationship. I didn't know what Christy Gaynor was capable of outside of real estate until we sat down during a huge life change of mine, and she really started going to work.
Yeah.
Got to meet this one, you got to talk to this one. And it was amazing to have that sort of, I don't know if it's a handhold but it was making connections for me. And I love that. So I think if you're listening, hopefully you got out of this discussion with Jason this part about looking at your tribe, assessing your tribe. He's going to put something in the podcast notes that you'll be able to sort of do a little worksheet or something to figure this out. Or you could always pick up Igniting the Firestarter Within and look at the book yourself.
Available on Amazon.
On Amazon. And I'm going to do a review because I didn't even think of that. Jason is working on another book now, and we're not going to go too deep into it, but one thing I want to talk about that's also in Igniting the Firestarter Within is this idea of what if abouts. Mm-hmm. And as you say on page 65, I believe, I want to just go to it now. You say, if I can read this part, what if abouts, you know them. They are as familiar as your best friend growing up, and they are as automatic as swallowing when you take a drink. They sound something like this. And then you go into a lot of negative comments. I can't do that. I know my what if abouts are, I might be too old for this. Love might have passed me by. My great job might have passed me by. My great this. Those are some of my what if abouts. I know you have some. You've told me some of the ones people put on Post-it notes, and I want you to talk about it more, but I just want to sort of go into it. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not educated enough. So let's talk a little bit about what if abouts, because I love the phrase, and I love that you're going to be doing a deeper dive.
Yeah. The word itself came from when I was writing the book. I really wanted a word that encompassed imposter syndrome, automatic negative thoughts, head trash, like all of that into one. And I couldn't find the word. And I was like, well, I have a master's degree in English. I'm entitled. I'll just make one up. So I did. And that's what it is. So it's what if abouts. And the definition is the pesky doubts and fears that work hard to keep us stuck and afraid. And
love that. Because it's so, it's a really alliterative, right? Is that the right term? Explanation. Mm-hmm. You could almost feel it and see it.
Well, I hope so. Because I mean, like you said, you have yours and I have mine. Mm. And so my two, when I first thought about, in fact, even before I thought about it, when it was recommended to me that I should be doing consulting, this person, because I was asking a good friend of mine, I said, I don't even know what do you do? And he said, I'm a consultant. I was like, I don't know what that means. And so he explained it to me, what he does. And he said, and by the way, you should be a consultant. And I was in the corporate world at the time. And as familiar as your best friends, I didn't even think about it. As soon as he said that, I said, nobody wants to hear what I have to say.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, I can't be a consultant.
Well, in essence, that's basically what I was saying. I was like, who's going to pay me for my knowledge? And what he said, and I don't even know how many times I've shared this lesson, but it's so true. He said, here's the deal. He said, I want you to think about 5 things that you do in your daily life that you've done for a long time that have helped make you successful.
Wow. Think of 5 things.
5 things that you've done in your life.
And you're doing daily or?
Daily, like
weekly?
If somebody said like, how do you do what you do? And these would be the things that come to mind. Well, I do, I'm good at this because I've done this, or, So he said, think of those 5 things. And I said, okay. He said, do you have that list? And I said, sure, in my head. And he said, here's the thing. 75% of the world does not know the thing that's on those lists. And I was indignant. I was like, there is no way that 75% of the world
You were like, listen, buddy. Buddy.
I was like, bro, no way. There's literally no way. And he said, and here's the other thing. So the other 25% of the world that does know about it needs to be reminded. So either way, you have a captive audience. And I told him, I said, I am going to prove you wrong. I don't believe you. There's no way this is true. So for the next year, I literally did. I went out and I tested some things in the world. And
do you have an example of one that you can remember?
Well, I'll tell you. So I happened to be at a company function when the place kicker for the Colts came to speak to the company.
Okay.
And it happened to be the day after he had broken the record for most points after touchdown. I think it may have been actually the year that the Colts won the Super Bowl. So they were winning. Adam Vinatieri is this guy's name. He was killing it. And so he came and all these, people wanted to see him. The auditorium was packed. And at the end, he said, anybody have any questions? And this lady said, how have you been successful you're always successful. In college, you were at, I think he was at the Patriots before he came to the Colts. You were successful there. You've been successful here. How do you do that? And I leaned back in my chair because I was sitting towards the back of the room, and I'm like, I want to see how people react when he says what he says.
Okay.
And here are the 2 things that he said. This still blows my mind. He said, the first thing is always be yourself.
What?
Right?
What?
There was a lady next to me that wrote that on her hand.
Okay.
And I'm like, duh. And he had some anecdote that went with it.
Okay.
And then the second thing that he said was, only do your job. And Dinine, you would have thought that there was cotton candy falling from the ceiling because people were like, oh my gosh, that's so good. People are like nudging each other. They're writing it down. People are
Sounds like a commercial.
Pulling their phone out and like typing it in their phone out if they were sending an email to themselves or what. And so when this is all over, we're standing in the elevator in the lobby because there were like 300 people trying to get back upstairs.
You're definitely trying to talk to him. You're definitely trying to talk to him.
And well, I hear this woman behind me as we're waiting, and she was like, did you hear what Adam said? That was so good. She said, from now on, I am going upstairs and I am only doing my job. And I'm like, who the hell else's job have you been doing? That you needed a place kicker to tell you that that's what you needed to do? And so here's what happened. I texted my friend. I said, you'll never guess what he just said. And I said, file this under duh. And he fired back at me and he goes, file that under money. And he was right. And I'm telling you that I did things like that for a year. And I came back and I said, you're wrong. You were wrong, but not in the way that I thought, and not in the way that you think that I thought. I said, it's not 75-25. It's 90-10. And I'm not even kidding you. It's ridiculous. And when I do keynotes, I have about 5 things that I feel like I have said. I don't even realize that I'm saying them because I've said them so much. They just, to like me, breathing. They're like the bland, like the not salty, not flavorful, like the thing that I feel like everybody knows this thing. And without fail, those are the things that people come up to me after keynotes and go, that thing you said. And I'm like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, please don't let it be this thing.
But I mean, this is going off in a little different direction. Yeah. But sometimes simplicity sells. And
well, clearly,
I think Vinatieri, right, knew that.
I'm not sure. Did I
say his name
that was
right?
intentional. I just think, but maybe, I don't know.
I mean, because I can see a little profoundness in only do your job. Like if right now, when I used to be home, right, with little kids, only do my job.
Right.
My job right now is to make sure that books get read.
Sure.
Food, but when I'm in a courtroom, right, only do your job. Right. You're not there to talk about the book you read last night to your 4-year-old.
Right.
You're there to, kick some ass for your client.
Well, and
only do your job might be a good.
And to his credit, to Adam's credit, for that one, I do remember the anecdote that he said. He said, when I get called out on the field, it's normally in a very high pressure situation, and a lot of times the game is on the line. And he said, so I'm going out on the field. There's a defensive line that wants to break my leg off of my body. There's an offensive line that wants to keep them from doing that. And in that offensive line is my snapper, and then there's a holder in front of me who's got to hold the ball. And he said, if I start thinking and focusing on the defensive line and how badly they could hurt me, or if there's going to be a hole in the offensive line, or what if my snapper doesn't snap it right? What if my holder doesn't catch it? He said, I'm not going to be focused on getting the ball through the uprights. That's the only he said, if I'm focused on anything else, I'm not going to be successful in what I'm doing. So in that way, sure, it's profound and it's true, but at the same time, it's like, who else's jobs are you running around doing? And begs the question too, why are you doing that?
Why? Well, like I said, I think we all wear multiple hats.
Sure.
And I think the profoundness, if that's a word, and the simplicity of it is when you're not wearing the mom hat at the moment, you wear the lawyer hat.
Sure.
When you're at work and you're teaching a sales team, you're not being a dad at that moment.
True.
And so even though that encompasses probably everything we do, it's also at the moment do that job. I mean, I can see a little bit. I can see it as a complete commercial where everybody's just, like you said, clapping and standing up, and it just looks ridiculous.
I mean, it was like 7 years ago, and it still blows my mind. I can see. I know exactly where I was sitting in this auditorium, and it still makes me crack up. And I had those as well when I was getting. So when my friend said you should be doing consulting, I said, nobody wants to hear what I have to say. So that was one of mine. I had 2 what if abouts that I mean thousands of times played in my head. And they were, you don't have anything to say. So a lot of times what happens with what if abouts is they want to discount you and hit on the things that will make you quit.
Yes.
So you don't have anything to say, right? So, well, I don't have anything to say. So what? So then the obvious response is, so why should I say anything? Oh, I shouldn't because I don't have anything to say, right? And you get in this stupid closed loop. So that was the first one. And then the second one, I feel like it took it up a notch because the next one was, even if you did, nobody cares. So if by some crazy miracle, the moon and the stars and the quasars and everything aligned for you to come up with something profound to say, nobody's going to listen.
No one's going to.
So just shut up, go sit in the corner.
And I have to say, I've been dealing a lot with learning about the brain and how it doesn't always help us. And you and I attended a workshop together by someone who told us how to name our brains for a minute. But what I've learned is that the brain is really not your friend.
It is not at all. So
like growing up, going through school like you did, college, then law school, you always thought your brain was your ticket to success, right? Like I was always like, I get A's, I do really good at this, or it all had to do with school. And what I've learned now is your brain is only there to protect you, and it doesn't really protect you because it just rehearses the bad at a rate of, 100 times to 1 as the good. It doesn't really, and I don't understand that about how we're made, but I've learned that it's a fact that your brain just wants to tell you how bad things are over and over.
Here's a staggering statistic, and I actually just used this a couple weeks ago in a keynote. So that 8 to 16,000 thoughts per day that we have, the average person has. Of those thoughts, 80%.
I know.
Okay, so
I know what you're going to say.
Let's do easy math. Okay,
yeah.
Let's say it's 10,000. You have 10,000 thoughts a day. 80% of that, 8,000 of your thoughts in a 24-hour period are negative.
And they're probably not even fully true.
Not true probably at all.
Right.
And here was the part that really hit me. 95% of those thoughts, so 9,500 of your 10,000 thoughts that you have today are repetitive. Not even anything new. And who knows repeating for how long? Could be since childhood. And what's interesting, what I've learned as I've started digging into this research around what if abouts is that they are often... we hear them in our heads, not always, but we hear them in our heads in the voice of the person who put it in there. So it's a parent, it's a spouse, it's a bully from school, it's a coach, it's a teacher, it's a sibling. Mine, which I turned into something else, when I was 16 years old, my geometry teacher announced to my entire class that I was unteachable because...
That's awful.
Here's what I didn't know. To defend him a little bit, I was quite a smartass when I was in high school. I know that comes as quite a surprise.
No, really?
I may have been doing some smartassy things when he was talking to me, but I legitimately didn't get it. And so I was asking a question, and I don't know if he thought I was like trying to give him a hard time or what, but he's pointing to this illustration in the geometry book. He's like, it's right there. And I'm looking at it and I don't see what he's talking. I don't see it. And I said, I don't see it. I don't get what you're talking about. He's like, he's like, it's right there, like punching on the book, pointing to it. And I was like, I don't see it. And he got so frustrated. He goes, he's like, I guess you're just unteachable then. And walked away. Well, fast forward 7 years when I was 23 and went to an eye doctor for the first time in many, many years. And the doctor's doing the thing where they're, putting the thing. And he's like, that's interesting. And it's not what you want to hear when you go to the doctor. And I was like, what? And he goes, well, hold on, let me do it again. He does it again. He goes, still didn't tell me what was wrong. Goes out in the hallway, gets his partner. He's like, hey, Joe, come in here, check this out. Like now I'm the lab rat. Cool. This is fun. And he goes, and he told me whatever the thing was. And I said, I don't know what that means. And he said, you don't have any depth perception.
Oh.
So that geometric figure that he was pounding on in my book, I can't see that because I don't see the depth in the way that they've drawn it. So it just didn't make any sense to me. It didn't make any sense to me. And what was funny was he said, you don't have any depth perception. I was like, well, what do you mean? He said, well, did you play sports growing up? And I know you'll appreciate this because of your son. I said, yes. He said, what sports did you play? I said, mostly baseball. He said, were you any good? And I said, no. Dinine, what your son doesn't play, he pitches, right?
He pitches.
Okay.
He used to hit and catch.
Okay, well, they put me in the outfield, right? Because that's where you put the kids who,
Not anymore, though. When you get higher up, they want them with the gun arms.
Yeah, well, I didn't have that or depth perception. And I think I was in middle school. So I wasn't this wasn't like peewee baseball. I literally put my hand up to catch the ball, to catch a fly ball, and it hit me right in the forehead.
I knew you were going to say, I don't know why.
I literally had seam prints on my forehead for like a week, which, growing up with a red afro, freckles, and pale skin, I really needed the seam of a baseball in the middle of my 5 head to make me, to keep the bullies away.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that.
Yeah, that was great.
So that's like, that's just a great story. But I'm veering off of what if abouts for 1 second, but it's like that saying, if you judge a fish by how well they can climb a tree, they'll lose every time.
Every time.
And so if you don't have depth perception, you'll lose that. But that's an interesting story.
So here's what happened. For 20-ish years, I walked around and I would say this to people. Like if there was like a math thing that had to be done, or like when somebody started talking to, heaven forbid, we talk about Excel spreadsheets and like how to, like formulas and all that. My response to that was, no, I'm a math idiot.
Right.
And how many times did I say that out loud? How many times did I say it in my head? And what happens is, what's really interesting about the brain is the brain doesn't know when you're trying to fool it or when it's true. Like you can smile in the mirror even if you don't feel like smiling, and it releases all of these same things, right? All these endorphins, because your brain doesn't know the difference. So I told my brain for 20 plus years that I was a math idiot. Well, guess what? I was. Because I had convinced myself that, and I would look at a problem and I would just get anxious. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. It stressed me out.
Yeah.
Well, then I started having to teach my kids math and go back and help with homework. And it turns out I wasn't a math idiot. He was just a bad teacher.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, with so many people's what if abouts, they don't have the opportunity to see the other side like I did in that situation. And so you go through life believing that I'm not good enough. And to your point about the
fish,
well, about the research that I started doing about what if about. So I've started asking people, when I talk about this in a keynote, I've started collecting them, and I have about 1,200 right now, and I'm slowly putting them into a database so I can slice and dice. I'm very interested to find out how many times the word enough applies to these.
I bet a lot.
It's a lot. And it's never I am enough. It's not something enough, right? Not smart enough, not pretty enough, not skinny enough, not experienced enough, not educated enough, not, fit enough. That's surprising to me. And then the other thing that's surprising is how much of these are related to our body image and the way that we look. I've had people say, I'm too black, I'm too European, I'm too Asian, I'm too fat, I'm too skinny, I'm too old, I'm too young.
Too short.
So those things that maybe we've kept inside, but we've been telling ourselves for a long, long time, are the things that come out. And what's super interesting for me is I've done keynotes for an entire, it was a women's banking conference. There were like almost 500 women in the room. And I've done keynotes for like construction foremen and supervisors. The what if abouts are pretty much the same. And I've started asking them to label like how old they are, what gender they are, and what industry they work in. And I think mostly because I wanted that information when I write the book. But my guess is if I mixed them all up, I wouldn't be able to tell, because they're pervasive across genders, across ages, across industries.
I bet that once you get all that in the database, it'll really be telling that there probably is no difference across socioeconomic and maybe even racial or diverse. That'll be interesting.
The one thing I know for sure from speaking about it and collecting them is that we all have them. Every single one of us.
Absolutely.
And several, typically.
Absolutely. So if you're out there and you're telling yourself you can't do something, just know that you're wrong. So tell yourself you can, or at least start trying to change the narrative in your head. Because like Jason just illustrated by his discussion, collecting 1,200 notes from people, everybody thinks there's not something enough to do what maybe they want to do. Maybe go for a promotion, maybe leave a job and start a business. You just tell yourself, I can, and just try. Like,
it's almost like a fake it till you make it.
Right.
But it's not a boasting fake it. It's like looking yourself in the mirror and just saying, I can. Because we're never going to kill every what if about.
No.
And we're always going to have that negative side of us. But fight it now. Like, I don't think we were brought up with enough tools to fight. Because like I said, I grew up thinking my brain knew everything. It's what got me the accolades in school and what got me to law school and what got me to win cases. I thought this brain could never fail me. And in just the past year and a half, I've learned that it can and it will if I leave it unchecked.
Well, and I would say even something on a more tangible, practical thing that I've started doing in the last year. So I will still say I have over 13,000 hours being in front of audiences in my lifetime.
Wow.
I'm pretty good at what I do.
I think so. I've seen you in front of audiences.
Thank you. And yet, still, not always, and not nearly as much as it used to be, but I was going to speak to a group of very well-educated hematologists and oncologists once. There were 10 of them around the table, and on average, their boss said that they had 16 to 20 years of education per person.
Wow.
I was on academic probation twice at IU. So
we've talked about that too.
So I'm like, what? So as I'm, and it's here in town, right? So I'm 20-minute drive, and I'm driving, and the what if abouts are like, who do you think you are?
Talking to a bunch of oncologists.
You're going to go talk to people with MDs and PhDs in medicine who are researchers. Like, you couldn't even nod your head in a conversation to say that, like, you agreed with somebody, because you're not even going to know what they're talking about. And so what I've started to do when that starts happening is out loud, try not to do this in a store where people are around because they could think you're a little odd. But out loud, I will say, who am I? I'm the person that's getting paid to do this, whose their boss is going to introduce me, whose slot they have on the calendar for me to come in and do this, and who created this opportunity by the things that I've done. That's who I am. Right. And what I've realized is that though they are tenacious, what if abouts are not very creative. So kind of like a bully, when you stand up to them, right, they tend to
die down, to
shrink back a little bit.
And that's a great way to probably wrap this up, that what if abouts are not very creative, like you just said.
They're not.
And just like a bully, you can outsmart it. Yes. And what I've learned is my brain is not putting me always in the right direction. Right. So I have started saying out loud, stop. I think I told you this last week. As soon as I start thinking, you're never going to get this, you're never going to go there, or your time has passed or whatever, I've started saying stop before I can even form words to. So I hope if you're listening that you've been able to understand that you don't always have to sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't have to give in to something that's telling you can't, and you don't have to give up because maybe you're looking around in your present day circumstances and they're not great. There's always a way to either find new people to hang out with. There's always a way to counteract these negative thoughts that we all deal with. There's some really good advice in this book, Igniting the Firestarter, and I hope that you'll agree there's some good advice contained within this podcast and interview. And I know that Jason has a person that he holds in very high regard named Seth Godin, and I thought we would end on a quote that you love from him.
Yeah, and I will also say that I got the great privilege to meet him. How did I meet him? Through Christy.
Oh my God.
That's so funny. I hadn't thought about that until right now. She was at a conference, and I didn't pay for the conference, but she got me in to go to lunch where he was speaking.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
And we were sitting close to the front, so I fanboyed all over this guy. I mean, when he was actually eating lunch when I went over and totally interrupted his lunch. And I had been listening to one of his books called Tribes as my corporate world was winding down, and I knew it. And he is the one who reads that book. So I went over and I just told him, and I almost started crying. I said, I've heard your voice in my head for so long because I've listened to this book 5 times.
Wow.
And I said, could I take a picture with you? And you hear these stories about people who meet their heroes and they're just not good people.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was the complete opposite of that. So he didn't stand up. He was, and you can actually see this on my website because I'm so proud of this picture. I will have it forever. But I got down on my knees next to him and put my arm behind the chair, and he leaned his head in on mine. I almost cried. I'm serious. I was like, that is the sweetest thing. And I mean, I just fanboyed all over him. And one of the things that he said that I've remembered forever, and I think that it's true, he said, we are always prepared. We're never ready. And that goes back to your mom, right?
Yeah. Consistent preparing.
Just if I just get to the end of the list, and what happens is you get to the end of the list and you're just going to keep adding more stuff on the list. And he has created this program called an alternate MBA program. It's not certified or whatever, but one of the phrases that he uses in this program is ship it. What good does a full warehouse of things do that you've created that you're waiting because we're not sure how the market's going to do it? We don't have the advertising campaign just right. We don't have the marketing right. We don't have the slogan. We ship it, put it out in the world and see what happens. And use it as a learning experience.
I mean, that's kind of the advice I got for the podcast from the producers that helped me launch, which was, Dinine, just put the first episode out. So maybe they're fans of his too.
He's one of the wisest people I've ever known, followed. I love him.
So that's, I guess, our ending piece of advice here, right? If you've got something, put it out there in the world, whether it's ship it, whether it's a poem, a podcast, an item in a warehouse, an invention, put it out there and see what happens.
Yeah.
All right.
Love that.
All right. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
This was great. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Remember that even in your worst days, there is always something beautiful. You just need to look for it. Until next time.